Odysseus survived the Trojan War. He watched kingdoms burn, outwitted kings, defeated armies, and helped destroy the greatest city in the ancient world. But the voyage home became a nightmare that lasted 10 years. His ships vanished one by one. His crew disappeared into the sea. Men were torn apart by things that should not have existed. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a god was waiting for him to fail. Because the war at Troy was not the end of Odysseus' story. It was the beginning of his punishment. This is the Odyssey. Troy had fallen. For 10 years, the Greeks had fought beneath its walls. Entire generations disappeared into the war. Kings crossed the sea chasing glory. Thousands died beneath the shadow of Troy's massive stone defenses. And in the end, the city burned. Greek soldiers flooded through shattered gates beneath fire and smoke. Temples collapsed into flame. Bronze statues of gods crashed into the streets below. The screams of the dying echoed through one of the richest cities in the ancient world. Everything Troy had been vanished in a single night. And standing among the ruins was Odysseus, king of Ithaca, the architect of Troy's destruction, the man whose deception finally ended the war. To the Greeks, he was becoming a legend. But victory changes men, especially men who survived too long. Odysseus was no longer simply a king trying to return home. Something inside him had changed during the war. He had begun to believe his own intelligence could overcome anything, any army, any king, perhaps even fate itself. But victory did not bring peace, because the gods were not finished with Odysseus, and before his journey ended, he would make an enemy of the sea itself. When the surviving Greeks finally departed Troy, the fleet stretched across dark waters beneath fading sunlight. Bronze armor reflected against the waves. Oars cut rhythmically through the sea. And for the first time in years, the soldiers allowed themselves to dream of home. Some imagined wives waiting on distant shores. Others imagined children who had grown older without them. Many had not seen their homes in over a decade. Some would never see them again. At first, favorable winds carried the fleet safely from Troy. But the farther they sailed, the more the sea itself seemed to change. The air felt heavy, unnatural. At night, dark clouds gathered silently across the horizon. The waves beneath the ships no longer felt calm. They felt alive, watching. And though Odysseus tried to hide it from the men, even he could feel something waiting beyond the sea ahead. The first landfall came at the city of the Cicones. Odysseus and his men attacked before sunrise. The defenders were overwhelmed quickly. Homes were looted. Food and wine were carried back toward the ships. At first, the Greeks celebrated another easy victory. The men who survived Troy believed themselves unstoppable. But Odysseus made a mistake. Instead of leaving immediately, the soldiers remained along the shoreline, celebrating their success. Wine flowed beside the surf, while smoke rose from the ruined city behind them. Discipline disappeared. The men laughed like the war was finally over. But while the Greeks celebrated, the Cicones gathered reinforcements from inland. At dawn, the counterattack came. The beach erupted into violence. Spears crashed against shields. Arrows darkened the shoreline. Greek soldiers stumbled through blood and seawater as enemy warriors stormed across the sand. Men who had survived 10 years at Troy were suddenly dying on a foreign beach before the journey home had truly begun. Odysseus fought desperately to pull the survivors back toward the ships. The Greeks finally escaped, but the fleet left weaker than before. Many ships now carried empty benches where warriors once rode. And the mood aboard the fleet had changed completely. The illusion of easy victory was gone. For the first time, fear had entered the voyage home. Days later, violent storms drove the fleet far from familiar waters. Towering waves battered the ships through endless darkness. Lightning split the sky above them, while the sea swallowed entire sections of the fleet into black rain. The Greeks drifted through unfamiliar waters for days. No stars, no sense of direction, only storm after storm across an endless sea. Eventually, the surviving ships reached another island, unlike anything they had seen before. At first, the land appeared peaceful, quiet, almost beautiful. Soft wind moved through tall grass beneath warm sunlight. No armies waited along the shore. No wars. No signs of danger. Only strange flowers growing endlessly across the island. Some of Odysseus's men wandered inland, searching for food, and encountered the island's inhabitants, the Lotus-Eaters. They offered the Greeks fruit taken from the strange flowers surrounding them. Sweet, fragrant, almost intoxicating. The soldiers accepted, and almost immediately, something changed. The men no longer cared about home. The war faded from memory. Their families disappeared from their thoughts. Even Ithaca itself began slipping away from them. All they wanted was to remain on the island forever, to sleep beneath the sun, to eat the lotus, and forget the world beyond the shore. Odysseus realized the danger immediately. This was not a battle that could be fought with swords. It was surrender, the slow destruction of memory itself. He dragged his men back toward the ships by force, while they begged to remain behind. Some cried openly, others fought against him. But Odysseus ordered them tied to the benches beneath the ships until the island vanished slowly into the mist behind them. Even then, some continued staring back toward the shoreline in silence, as if part of them had been left behind forever. But worse things were waiting ahead. Far worse. Eventually, the fleet reached a distant coastline, scattered with towering cliffs and sea caves. The island felt abandoned. No villages, no harbor defenses, no human voices. Only enormous sheep grazing silently across the hills. The silence itself felt wrong. Odysseus selected several men and traveled inland to investigate. Deep within the cliffs, they discovered a massive cave. The entrance towered above them, far too large for any ordinary man. Inside were baskets overflowing with cheese, clay containers filled with milk, and enormous tools unlike anything made by human hands. Some of the Greeks immediately urged Odysseus to steal supplies and leave, but Odysseus refused. His curiosity overcame caution. He wanted to meet the creature who lived there. Perhaps they could trade. Perhaps they would receive gifts. So they waited inside the cave as darkness slowly swallowed the island outside. The fire burned low. The cave remained silent. Then, the sound came. Heavy footsteps, slow, violent. The ground itself seemed to tremble. A gigantic shadow crossed the entrance, and then the creature entered the firelight. Massive, towering over the Greeks, a single eye staring from the center of his face. Polyphemus, the Cyclops, son of Poseidon. The giant carried bundles of wood across one shoulder as though they weighed nothing. Without effort, he rolled an enormous stone across the cave entrance. The Greeks instantly understood the truth. They were trapped. Then Polyphemus finally noticed them. His expression held no curiosity, no mercy, only hunger. Odysseus attempted to speak peacefully. He invoked the ancient laws of hospitality, respected across the world of men. But the Cyclops laughed at the very idea. To him, the Greeks were not guests. They were prey. Without warning, Polyphemus seized two men in his enormous hands. The Greeks screamed as the giant smashed them against the stone floor. Bones shattered instantly. Blood splattered across the cave walls. And before the horrified survivors could react, the Cyclops devoured them alive beside the fire. The cave filled with screams. The sound of crunching bone echoed through the darkness. Odysseus stood frozen in disbelief. These were warriors who had survived 10 years beneath the walls of Troy, men who had fought through one of the greatest wars of the ancient world. And now they were dying helplessly inside a cave, being eaten alive by something out of a nightmare. That night, none of the Greeks slept. They listened to the giant breathing beside the fire, while terror spread through the darkness around them. Some wanted to attack immediately, but Odysseus understood the trap. Even if they killed Polyphemus, none of them could move the massive stone sealing the entrance. At dawn, the Cyclops awoke hungry once more. Again he seized men from the terrified group. Again blood covered the cave floor. Then he rolled aside the stone just enough to release his flock into the sunlight before sealing the Greeks inside once more. The survivors sat in silence, completely helpless. Every passing hour brought them closer to death. Odysseus knew they would not survive another night, so he formed a plan. Hidden within the cave was a massive wooden staff used by the Cyclops. Odysseus ordered the men to sharpen its end into a giant spear. Then he prepared another weapon: wine. Strong wine taken from earlier raids. That evening, when Polyphemus returned, Odysseus offered him the drink. The Cyclops consumed it greedily, again and again. The giant laughed as the alcohol overwhelmed him. For the first time since entering the cave, the monster seemed vulnerable. Before collapsing into drunken sleep, Polyphemus demanded to know Odysseus's name. Odysseus answered with a lie. Nobody. Soon after, the Cyclops collapsed unconscious beside the fire. Odysseus gave the signal.
The Greeks drove the sharpened stake directly into the giant's eye. Polyphemus exploded into screams so violent the cave itself seemed to shake. The smell of burning flesh filled the darkness. The Cyclops stumbled blindly through the cave, roaring in agony. Outside, other Cyclopes gathered and shouted questions through the entrance. Who was attacking him? Who was trying to kill him? Blinded and enraged, Polyphemus screamed back into the night. "Nobody is killing me!" Hearing this, the others believed no real danger existed, and slowly they walked away. Inside the cave, Odysseus realized the deception had worked, but they were still trapped. At dawn, the blinded Cyclops rolled away the stone once more to release his sheep. This time, however, Odysseus carried out the final stage of his plan. The Greeks tied themselves beneath the massive animals, using thick wool to conceal their bodies. One by one, the sheep passed beneath the Cyclops' searching hands. Polyphemus felt across their backs, never realizing the men clung beneath them. Slowly, the Greeks escaped into the morning light. The survivors sprinted toward the ships. Oars crashed violently into the water as the fleet pushed away from shore. And for a moment, it was over. Odysseus had survived. He had outsmarted the impossible, defeated a monster no ordinary man could overcome. But then, his pride returned. As the ships sailed farther from the island, Odysseus stood and shouted back toward the cliffs. He revealed his true name. He wanted the Cyclops to know exactly who had beaten him. And in that moment, everything changed. Because Polyphemus was not merely a monster hidden inside a cave. He was the son of Poseidon, god of the sea, god of storms. The Cyclops lifted his bleeding face toward the heavens and called upon his father for vengeance. He begged Poseidon to curse Odysseus, to ensure he would suffer for what he had done, to make the journey home endless. And far beyond the horizon, the sea began to answer. Storm clouds gathered across the darkening sky. The waves grew violent beneath the ships. Thunder rolled through the distance. And Odysseus, still believing himself victorious, sailed directly into the wrath of a god. And somewhere beyond the storm, Odysseus's journey was only beginning. Subscribe to Immortal Kings, because the deeper you go into the past, the more you realize history isn't what we know. History is what survived, and some stories are still waiting to be found.